From vision to action, what's that all about?
What we're seeing in Africa now is incredible economic growth. A lot of countries are really having a tough time globally, but out of the 10 countries with the fastest growing economies in the world, 7 of them are African countries, and at the same time we are of course seeing the same problems in Africa as other places with a lack of inclusive growth. There's more than 1 billion people in Africa, 60% of them are young people, and a lot of them lack jobs.
Inclusive growth is a follow-on or a carry-on theme from Davos in January, and that's become a real clarion call this year. Why is it that with emerging markets powering ahead, surging ahead, growing, the poor remain poor in these economies?
You know, there have been a lot of poverty eradication globally during the last decade, but with the soaring food prices, we are seeing that some countries are now moving a little bit backward. We know that there are a lot of poor people also in Africa. We know a prerequisite for fighting poverty is of course economic growth, but what we're seeing increasingly is that economic growth doesn't create all the jobs that are needed, and when you are in a situation with more than 60% of the 1 billion people in Africa being under 25 years old, we need hundreds of millions of jobs in the coming decades, and this is what we need to discuss and see how we can manage.
A variety of sub-themes exist for this agenda for 2011. A lot of leadership issues coming to the fore, questioning whether leaders have the gravitas to lead Africa in this growth process. Then there are a lot of issues around which sectors would be a support to growth, so there's a manufacturing debate. And then there's a lot of emphasis on the upcoming UN conference on climate change and the whole linkages between the environment, economic development and growth. How is WEF going to handle this entire agenda in order to address some of the issues you're talking about?
That's a big question, but let's start with on an optimistic note. There are more democracies in Africa than there ever have been, and we are seeing new democracies in Tunisia, also in Egypt, and also Sudan. Secession is so far moving in the right direction. What we are seeing is, of course, that there is a huge potential when it comes to food production in Africa in the future. 60% of the uncultivated arable land globally is in Africa, but still you have countries in Africa that are net importers of food that could have been exporters. So this is governance issues. It's also about leadership. You have to implement transparency. You have to stick to corporate governance and being diligent and accountable for and towards your voters.
The bulk of the work that you do and the essence of the work that you do is to ensure that stakeholders and people affiliated to the World Economic Forum are working in tandem with the gains for 2011. What does that entail essentially?
So what is unique with the World Economic Forum is that we have our business partners, but we do this partnership together with governments, international organizations and civil society. And we know that it's only to get all these players together that you really can move issues forward. Take, for example, the climate change that you mentioned. Climate change is going on. It's not a theoretical thing. We see that, for example, in Somalia, Kenya, also Tanzania, that land that was arable before is not arable anymore. There is lack of water, and we're going to succeed in feeding 2 billion more people by 2050. We have to manage also climate change. We need to do better when it comes to mitigating CO2. And if we don't handle climate change in a better way than today, there will be not enough water around to also cultivate the arable land that is accessible in Africa.
How do you respond to people who say the World Economic Forum is just a talk shop, it's just an opportunity for important men and women in business to network and pat each other on the back?
I totally disagree. I think out of the World Economic Forum there has come a lot of important partnerships between business, governments and civil society in the water field. You know, in Davos, the Gavi, the vaccination program was launched by Bill Gates. We have a lot of things going on here that shows that no one can do and move the envelope on their own. We need more collaboration, and we need more business-oriented programs also from the government side.